Hello, Gary. How's it
Hey,
going?
hey, good, good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. Absolute pleasure to have you here.
You know, I'm not playing with Spandau Ballet at the moment. We're taking another one of our hiatuses because we're always falling out. I mean, this is a trouble, you know.
Are they together? Is Tony with you? Is Tony not with you? Is he having a spat with him? What is going on? It's kind of hard to tell, but
It's constant, man. But it's really, I think what it is, you know, you get together you don't even get together as friends when you're kids. You get together because he happens to be the guy who plays bass. He happens to be the guy who sings. He's got the leather jacket, you know, and so you come together and, you know, you all you think, live and breathe a band 24/7. That's all you do when you're young. And all through my 20s, you know, I didn't have a family then. I just lived and breathed Spandau Ballet, writing songs for them and touring around the world with them. But it doesn't, as you get older, you know, other private lives start to come in and you get married and you have kids. And it's really hard to pretend you're that gang of kids again. So, you know, I think you've really got to have a really well-balanced respect for each other. But our band actually, unfortunately, at the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, had a massive sort of falling out. I mean, it's an interesting discussion. You know, I wrote all the songs for the band, and
yeah, I want to hone in on that as well, because a lot of the students that we have will be very much interested in that creative process, the process of making music.
Yeah,
and I often think about the challenges of actually making music that someone else is gonna sing at times.
Yeah,
and other people have to bring their interpretation to what you're doing and the challenges that come.
Well, I wasn't a singer in the band, so, you know, I was a songwriter, a bit like in The Who. Pete Townsend writes a song, Roger Daltrey sings, you know, and the same, you know, I suppose in Oasis it was the same, and it's the same in Spandau Ballet. But, you know, I think sometimes when you are the sole songwriter, there's a slight sense of imbalance that goes on, and let's face it, there's a little bit of that that's financial. And then there's a kind of growing pressure to allow other people to write songs, and that's fine. I wasn't stopping anyone from writing songs, but we just, you know, I think I got tired of pushing all my songs into the same box. We'd done sort of 10 years together, 14 including the school days, and I think, you know, I wanted to give it a rest for a while. You know, I probably wanted to do my own thing, and I went back into acting, which is where I started. And they did the film about the Cray twins. But so we've always had issues.
I love the way you say that so flippantly, the film about the Cray twins. I mean, massive. And it was a big success, big British movie about, you know, British icons, the Cray twins as well. But, you know, I just wanted, because we're flying so far through, and like, all of these things I could just hone in on individually. But just to put it into context, like Spandau Ballet, arguably one of the most successful bands at that moment, during that period of the 80s. You were in your pomp, literally killing it. You couldn't escape it. The music was, you know, everywhere. I heard it growing up through my childhood. You're an Islington boy, right?
That's right. Yeah. We all come out of Islington.
So I'm gonna hazard a guess, you're probably an Arsenal fan then.
Arsenal, yeah.
Well, you know, I'll have to forgive you for your sins because you make great music. So
not all the band were Arsenal, some of them were Spurs, but
okay, good, thank you. All right, that redeemed it, right? Yeah. So you're born and bred in Islington, you go school round there. Yeah. So you're just schoolmates, right? You're just schoolmates knocking about with a dream of making it big in the music industry.
I started in as an actor, as a child actor. I went to a regular school, but there was this, and I think this is an interesting point because I think it's about mentors and about how much we all need to find someone who's a bit more experienced than us, who can guide us, and because that's outside of our parents as well. I mean, so I've got my love from my parents, and I know I can trust that. But I go to this drama club called Anna Scher. This woman called Anna Scher was running, and it was just full of working class kids. Phil Daniels was there, and I mean Pauline Quirk, Linda Robson, loads of people that have gone on to be successful. Peter Hugo Daly, I suddenly started getting work as a kid with my brother, doing TV shows and doing films and stuff like that. And but at the same time, so she's one of my mentors, Anna. What she does is her method is to instill confidence. She gives you praise, no matter what you're like, She will find the little tiny bit of something great in you and hone in on that and pull it out. And I think that's really important. You want someone who's, you know, because all of us at home often don't feel good about ourselves. We, you know, even now I write a song and a little voice on my shoulder goes, that's rubbish, you know, and but you know, confidence is everything. So she gave me that. And then at the same time, my mum and dad had bought me a guitar for Christmas. A sort of cheap one that I could cut my fingers on. It was like cheese wire. And, but I learned 3 or 4 chords. And the first thing I did is I don't want to sing anyone else's songs. I remember this book had a song in it called If I Had a Hammer. And it went, if I had a hammer, I'll have a hammer in the morning. I went, do you know what? I really like those chords, but I hate that tune.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a tune and a bunch of words to go with it. And I didn't even know that was songwriting. And then
how old was you then?
11.
So you're 11 years old. You've heard a song. Quite like this. This is cool. Don't like the words.
Yeah.
That's the beginning of you creating now.
Well, I think chords are really important in creating. So, and I tell you what it is. It's about ownership. So if I hear a couple of chords, maybe in a classical piece or maybe in a folk song or even a pop song, and you think, well, I like those, I really like those, but I want to own them, but I can't own the whole thing that they've just written. But if I start to move it this way and move it that way, and then it moves a long way from the other person, because you don't want to end up in court.
Yeah.
You own it. And we didn't own anything in our house apart from the cat. Everything was on hire purchase. You know, we paid, you know, the sofas, we had to pay every month. My mum did. The TV was on hire. The cat was the only thing we owned. So I was making things for me to own in my bedroom with this little guitar. Anyway, I ended up playing them at my school prize giving when I was 11. And there was a great man there called Trevor Huddleston. And he was the Bishop of Stepney, but he was also the head of the anti-apartheid movement in this country.
Oh, wow.
And he came to our house, our little council flat, and he one Thursday evening, and I know it was a Thursday because Top of the Pops was on, which was a really
which was absolutely critical.
It's critical. I mean, 16 million people a week watch Top of the Pops. My nan knew who number 1 was every week, you know. So
that's your window to the world of what is going on here.
Yeah, and he brings round a cassette recorder, which had just come out, had just been invented, if you like. And he wanted to give it to me as a gift. And he said, every time you write a song, I want you to record it and send it to me where I am in Stepney. But at that moment, Rod Stewart was singing Maggie May on the TV on Top of the Pops. And I went, that's what I do. That's what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just an eye opener, you know, and I had a responsibility to this guy to try and, you know, my dad says, you better hurry up and write another song so you can, you know, send it to him because he's giving you this expensive gift. And so I got these mentors that were in my
key people early in your life that are encouraging and stimulating that bit of creativity in you.
Yeah. The other person I didn't know comes along, David Bowie. I've never met him, but he's on Top of the Pops one day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and he's singing a song called Starman, and he looks amazing. He looks like no one who lives in my street.
Yeah.
You know, just so alien and different and androgynous.
Is this the point where we've got the kind of the makeup thing going on, the big hair?
He's Ziggy Stardust. No, he's got short red hair, and he's Ziggy Stardust at this point. And you know, Bowie, I think, was such an amazing performer. He was a one-off. You know, there aren't many of them. You know, in my sort of lifetime, you know, there's sort of Bowie, Freddie Mercury, Prince, you know, Marvin Gaye, you know, all dead apart from Mick Jagger, who's, you know, still doing it. But
still touring.
Yeah. But so all that combination, what David then gave me was that actually what I want is my journey forward to get out of where I was. That music, this thing that I loved, could transport me to a place that's not just away from my council flat, but somewhere imaginary, somewhere that was grander and greater than real life. And that became my real, and I still get goosebumps talking about it or thinking about it now, because it was, you know, I can see myself at that age, you know, 12 or whatever I was, and just, and and then just realizing that what I wanted to do was to make music and play in a band. And
so I guess then in a way, so David Bowie, who is Brixton originally, isn't he? Yeah. So the other side of London now has sort of tapped into this idea of this escapism, this kind of fantasy within music, and how far it can take you from your own setting. And has that really inspired you?
I think what's interesting is bands at that time, you know, they dressed up. There was the whole glam rock thing. There was Roxy Music, Brian Ferry, and even with punk, it was still otherworldly. It was still people dressing up, looking mad. I think to differentiate, white rock music now doesn't really have that sense of another world, but rap does. You know, I mean, you know, when you see Stormzy doing Glastonbury, and it's like, man, this is like a superhuman.
Yeah,
you know, and he acts like a superhuman. He's not acting like Ed Sheeran, you know, who's playing down to the Boy Next Door thing. And I think that's where the scene is there now, you know, and that scene of wanting to take music to a higher place. You don't have to be like that. That's how I was. You can.
That's what motivated and inspired you.
Motivated me because, you know, we were mundane, man. You know, we had a very ordinary but full of love house. And I honestly don't know what I would have done. My dad was a printer. My mum was a dinner lady. I don't know where I would have gone without music. My brother nearly went, because my brother played in the band too, Martin, you know, for anyone who doesn't know. And, you know, my brother was also a really good footballer and nearly got signed for Arsenal.
Okay.
Say nearly, but he had an issue with his knee, I don't know.
It's always an issue with the knee, isn't it? It's always an injury. They can never accept. They never accept that they weren't good enough. I'm only joking, Gary.
I remember my brother being really. He was a showman even as a kid playing football. So he had a pair. You couldn't buy coloured football boots then. You know, you could only buy black football boots.
That's it. Yeah, of course.
He had a pair of black football boots. And my mum worked in this, she did some work doing seams as a seamstress, and she had this fake fur around the house. So he lined his boots with fake fur and painted them sky blue.
Well, there you go.
The teacher went mental.
Well, he was already bringing the theatre to the football pitch. We can see it was in the nature. So there you are, right? So now we're talking like early school age. You've got your cheese cutter of a guitar, you know, that'll cut your fingers to ribbons. You're being inspired by, you know, the likes of Bowie and stuff like that. And acting is now at the forefront of your success.
You know what? When I get to 16, I drop acting and I go to Anna Scher and I say, you know, I just want to do music and I've got to put my heart and soul into this.
But there must have been a moment just before you did music when you've got this sort of humble upbringing, right? Where there must have been one or two acting jobs where you thought, I'm on the path. This is great. Yeah. That feeling of, wow, look at this. Hey, Mum, hey, Dad, look what I'm doing.
I was lucky, you know, I got this part in a thing called the Children's Film Foundation. There used to be this thing called Saturday Morning Pictures when I was a kid, because there was no TV on Saturday morning. You'd go to the local cinema with a bunch of other kids and they'd play kids' movies. And I made one of those movies. And it ended up getting a royal premiere because it was the 21st anniversary of the Saturday Morning Pictures. And it got, and the Duchess of Kent came or something like that. And that was a big moment. But what I did with the money I earned from that film is I bought my first electric guitar.
So you're already thinking, yeah, love that. But you're already invested in yourself. And I talk a lot about this with our students as well. I guess at that point, you've made some money from it, but you're spending it back into your own creativity.
Well, my dad was tough because I had a paper round when I was 11. I don't know whether this is interesting to everyone, but
everyone's got their journey, and this is a journey of success.
Yeah. My dad said, right, every time you bring the money home on a Saturday, you have to give a third of it to your mum for housekeeping. So all of the time I was at home living with my parents, I always gave a third of everything I owned to my mum and dad, and that was meant to teach me some kind of responsibility with money. Now I just give all of it to my wife, you know. She deals with it.
She does the responsible bit. Yeah. But so then you're acting now. You're getting these acting roles, and still the big picture is music. Still want to do music.
Yeah, you know what? I played with a load of blokes that were much older than me, and we did a bit of jazz funk. We did sort of some Doobie Brothers type stuff. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I was like the kid, and they were in their late 20s, early 30s. I was 15.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I thought it was really hard to get into music because music didn't belong to me, because music was the generation above me. All the big stars were, you know, at least 10 years older than me. And then punk happened. And punk in 1976 was basically a clearing out of all the
old
Claptons and the old, and it was a kind of, I mean, they were still a bit older than us. I was still a bit young for punk, but it was a sort of anyone can do it kind of feeling. A bit, I suppose, a bit like grime or something like that.
Yeah,
you know?
definitely.
Grime is very similar to punk.
Yeah, and I think what a lot of people around Europe and internationally, that a lot of the younger generation now don't realize, is that this resurgence in fact, this emergence of an urban scene in Britain, of like the black music culture in Britain, we've always been second fiddle to America. So this is a brand new uprising. Yeah. It feels like it's always been there, but it's a brand new uprising, and it's wave and paved the way for a whole new bunch of artists to take.
And like punk, it wasn't British kids singing with an American accent.
Yeah.
You know, this is British kids singing in their own accent about the things that concern them, that are very parochial to in their world, and, you know, street stories that.
Do you see parallels? Do you see?
Well, I think with punk it was most certainly very similar, but it was very tough to sell that lyrically to America. You know, I think, you know, to be an artist that can sell across the Atlantic, you have to have something much more universal. So it's always odd, you know. Bruce Springsteen and Americans can sing about every single city in America, but it's very hard for us to sing about a city. You know, it's hard to put Manchester into a song and then to sell it to America, you know, where we always see America as this incredible sort of cinematic landscape that we kind of aspire to. They don't look at us like that. But in saying that, they bought the Beatles, and the Beatles didn't sing with an American accent either. They sang with their own Liverpudlian accent right at the start. So they had faith in their own culture, their own local culture. And they're a really interesting piece of social history, the Beatles, because it could only have happened in Liverpool. So there, you know, all rock music before then was American, you know, and the Beatles were the first port that a boat coming from New York with vinyl on it would stop off at. So you could buy vinyl in Liverpool before anywhere else in the UK.
That's where it made it to first.
And their manager run the local record shop, which they went to. So they were getting all this stuff, but they really did project their own culture so much into their music. And so I think sometimes it's also, as much as I talk about David Bowie and being other people, and it's also about being yourself. It's about thinking that what you have is a story worth telling.
So can I ask you at this point then, Gary, you're as someone that was writing, and the beginning of your, you know, the first pieces you're creating, was there ever a conflict that was saying, oh man, I need to do something that will cross the Atlantic. I need to have this kind of American gloss and glamour about what I'm doing? Or did you always have faith in your own voice, your own sound, and your own style?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I think at the beginning, you know, when after punk, you know, there was a bit of a hiatus, and then some clubs started around London, one famously called the Blitz Club, and it was about a lot of kids dressing up and doing the absolute, people like Boy George doing the opposite of punk in a way, and you know, wearing makeup and, you know, looking quite outrageous, and but listening to German electronic music at the time. So Kraftwerk were really, really popular. So but things that Bowie had kind of validated, like Iggy Pop, and you know, Bowie was doing electronica then as well, and the first synthesizers were happening.
What are we talking here? Are we talking late 70s?
79.
Yeah. Okay.
So, you know, I'd heard synthesizers on some prog rock records, on Stevie Wonder records, you know, but when I heard Kraftwerk, this was amazing. This was 4 on the floor bass drum. and this just gorgeous, simple, rich tones that were coming out of their Moogs or whatever they were using. I mean, obviously Pink Floyd had some synthesizers on Dark Side of the Moon, but this was only the synthesizer.
The synthesizer played a major role now. It wasn't just this backing sound or this little melody line. It was dominating the sound of the music. And
it was so different from the big brash electric guitar of punk, you know. But also the other big difference is there was that element of, you know, I was a soul boy as well. I liked everything. I loved dancing in clubs as a soul boy, and, you know, to all the, you know, the disco records that were coming out in the late 70s. But I liked punk as well. What Kraftwerk were, there was a kind of combination of chic drums and stark kind of European sounding cold synthesizers. And I think that was probably what the sound of the Aces was in the end. It was like Kraftwerk, Bowie, punk and funk, you know, and that sort of jammed itself together, and with bands like ourselves and Duran Duran and things. But anyway, so synthesizer, I went straight out and bought, we all clubbed together with our band that started at school, which is pretty much the same band that ended up being called Spandau Ballet. And we went out and we bought a monophonic synthesizer. And I brought it home and I just started writing riffs on it, you know, and then we'd go into rehearsals and John would just say, our drummer, just play 4 on the floor, you know, just keep it real dance grooves. And that ended up being our first album. And then when we went on to do our second album, we were still influenced by the British clubs, London club scene. And
well, you were signed at this point, so you were
we got signed. So what happened is, you know, in this journey of how it works, we felt that we had this really good manager who's a mate of ours at school. He was older.
Do you know what? Can I just interject here at this point? A lot of people ask me about where do you find managers, but it's normally just a mate that believes in what you're doing, isn't it?
He was
Everyone's got this idea that it's some guy in a suit that comes out of a massive label, but often that initial manager is someone that's willing to put in their time and believe in what you're doing. And it could be.
Well, I think there's a big difference between the generation that came before me tended to be managed by initially agents and promoters and people that were much older than them and were in the business. And they probably mostly all got ripped off, all the bands. Because of punk and because of Malcolm McLaren managing the Pistols, and a lot of young people started managing punk bands, it kind of made managing sexy as well, because it's also a creative thing to do. So there was this guy, and he was just 2 or 3 years above us at school, and we were all in a pub together rehearsing one day, and he went, "I'll manage you, I'll get you some gigs," because he loved us, right? He thought we were the best band ever. And he believed in it. And we were the only band he was going to manage. He wasn't going to manage a roster. He was just going to manage us. And he had this, when we found this club Blitz and we realized what we have, because this is the key, actually, the difference between what my generation and now. The place, all youth culture had to have place, had to have a geography. So it had to have an area and a club that they centered around, you know. So if you go back to, you know, the Ilpie Island where the Rolling Stones started, everyone just went to that club. And that's where that whole scene started. The UFO Club on Tottenham Court Road is where Pink Floyd started and psychedelic movement began. Mm-hmm. Then Bowie and T-Rex started at Middle Earth in Covent Garden. And, you know, there's a Hacienda up in Manchester where a lot of those bands started. So we all had to go out and be in this little club. And that was a commitment, you know, to go somewhere. Now place is on the internet. Mm-hmm. So your place that you find is somewhere on the internet, but that is so big and so very difficult to focus on. But that's just happens to be where it is right now. And it's on Instagram and it's on all of those, you know, TikTok or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we started going to this club. There was electronic music. That was the vibe. And our manager said, right, what we want to do is not send off tapes to record companies. And what we shouldn't do is play anywhere that anyone else plays. So, and this is a kid who's like just got this great idea. So he goes, we're going to make it so hard for record companies to see you that they're going to be begging to sign you. And he was right. And what he did, so we played that club, the Blitz. We wouldn't let any record companies in. And then we went and played a rave, like warehouse party. Then we decided to rent the HMS Belfast boat on the Thames.
Okay.
We didn't tell them we were a band coming. We said we're going to have it for a university party.
Yeah, right. If you told them you was a band, you probably wouldn't have got it.
Wouldn't have got in. So we played this boat, and there was people turning up, Boy George, mad hair, all girls dressed up mental. I remember one bloke turning up. He plugged himself into the socket, and he had this long dress on, and it was flashing with light bulbs. And again, we didn't invite any record company.
Did you at that point think, I'm onto something here, when you see someone like Boy George walking onto the...
Well, he wasn't Boy George then. He didn't even know he could sing.
So at that point, he hadn't established his career yet either. So it was just it was just emerging people at that point.
Sade was in our scene as well.
And you didn't even know, yeah.
No, she hadn't been singing. She was just a girl who went to St. Martin's College in fashion. So, but I thought that plan was really good. And this, because the point of that was mystique, generate a lot of noise and mystique, but don't ever make yourself common. So the record companies couldn't hear our tapes. So then one day we invite one of them in, and that's how special it was for him. He was the only one invited in. This is a guy who ran Island Records. And maybe we weren't even any good, but it was that kind of buzz.
Exclusivity that you created, the mystery, the hard to get access to.
I said, now that's really hard now, because if we had been around now, people would have filmed it on their phones. It would have gone on YouTube, and someone would have written bollocks underneath it, and it would be over.
Yeah, you would have been trolled. Yeah. So that plan had its time and had its place. And I guess now everyone has to kind of come up with their own ingenious plan. But your manager at that time had this idea. Let's make as much noise, but as little visibility as we possibly can. Yeah. And then I guess the guy walked in from Ireland now, and he must be screaming and shouting because he feels like the biggest person in the music industry. Because he's been in, he's seen the back. I'm going to talk to everyone about it.
So in the end, we had a choice of people to sign to.
Okay.
I mean, now I want to just quickly go back to your last question. Did I ever feel like I was writing for America? Well, listen, man, I love American music. You know, I mean, and I love singles. I'm not. You know, for me at that time, singles were the greatest piece of art form ever. And then I got into albums. And albums in those days were very much an art form. They were a 2-act piece. You thought about, when you put your record together, you thought about, what's my last track on side 1? What's my first track on side 2, the beginning of the next act? What's my penultimate track before the closer, which has to be magnificent? Where now, I think when it went off of vinyl, it went onto CD, and then later when it went on to streaming, it's kind of just starts at the best track and ends up at the worst track.
I think we're back.
I don't think that's the way forward. I think making albums is still a piece of an art form that you can still make work on streaming as well. You know, where you spread the weight of your tracks. You don't just try and bunch it all up the front. You know. So
you feel like having vinyl at that time made it a much more thought-driven process because you got less space, haven't you? Basically, you've got less space to put less tracks, so you got to make them count.
Yeah, you know, vinyl was invented for classical music, and because it's 20 minutes each side on an LP, on a 33, you know, normal album, and that 20 minutes was roughly the length of a movement in a symphony. Okay. So this is way before rock music, and then rock musicians came and sat in on that and just went, okay, we've got 20 minutes. That's about 4, 5, 6 songs. We're going to put a album together. That's about 12 songs. So the first 2 albums, our first 2 albums, were very much influenced by London club culture, by, you know, trying to do things that were different, finding ourselves, you know, difficult second album. But I then started listening a lot to Al Green and Marvin Gaye and blue-eyed soul people like Robert Palmer, Daryl Hall, John Oates. And I just, you know what? I want to get away from the London club scene. I want our band, I mean, we'd already been on Top of the Pops 6 times, but I want our band to start being universal, global.
What were the big hits for you at that point? Because
there was, so to cut a long story short, was the first one with a lot of electronica on it. One called The Freeze, one called Muscle Bound. Then there was Chant Number 1, that was a kind of funk track that we did with these this black band from London called Beggar and Co. And who were doing, and in those days, black bands and white bands hardly ever mixed, you know. Okay. But we did a Top of the Pops together, and I'd just written this song, I Don't Need This Pressure, on Chant Number 1, and I said, would you guys like to play horns on the record? And then we ended up doing a record with them as well. So there was a bit of that. And that did well. But I don't know, you know, there was a sense for me, I didn't want to write a song from the groove up, which I'd written all the way through that. It was always about the dance, the riff, the groove. Now I want to write one that I can just play on an acoustic guitar or on a piano. And then I started writing the album that was the True album, you know, and those songs True and Gold and which are the
songs that really resonate with me.
So that's our third album.
Wow, they are massive songs.
And they started getting played in America then. And
okay, so that's when you crossed the Atlantic in terms of your success.
Yeah, and True was a weird record because it happened with us on chart number 1 already. We went to New York to do some radios in New York, and we ended up doing Kiss FM, which is a black music only radio station.
Okay.
And I remember walking into there, and that they had a bit of a shock when they saw that we were just
a bunch of white guys. What the hell's going on here?
And then with the True album, True crossed over and got played on white radio, pop radio, and black radio. And to this day still does, you know. And we ended up doing a program called Soul Train, which
of course.
So honored to do. I think we were like the 4th white band ever to do it. I think
is that where they do the walk down the thing?
Yeah, and there's no, just the best dancing you've ever seen.
Yeah. I love that.
And we did a couple of tracks on there, and I think that was. I didn't sit and think I've got to write a song for America. To be honest, I was having an unrequited love affair with someone, and she inspired me. And
she was a muse.
She was my muse, and I wrote this song that was kind of based on an Al Green sort of feel to it, a kind of chord sequence that he would have, about ownership. I wanted to own that kind of music. So I went and started writing a song like that. And I think it wasn't until we developed it in the studio vocally. I mean, what we normally did in those days is I would write a song on piano or guitar. I would bring it into the rehearsal space. I wouldn't make a demo.
Mm-hmm. And lyrics as well? Lyrics at this point?
Well,
or just...
yeah, lyrics. Okay. And so I could sit and sing it to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I would play it to the band, and I'd have some idea about how the drums would go. Maybe the bass had an important riff. If it did, I'd show my brother that. If not, he would feel his way around the chords. And Steve, who was playing percussion and sax, and we'd all kind of just muck in. I already had the arrangement worked out, as it were, the structure, because I think the structure, there's no song without structure.
Yeah.
Structure is the most important thing in a song. I worked with Trevor Horn a few times, and Trevor Horn, who's one of the greatest producers of the 80s and still is so sick. They had a #1 at Christmas with the Rod Stewart album. And he said every song has to have 5 tricks. And that's stuck in my head since 1983 when he told me that.
Mm-hmm.
And he's right. It's got to have 5 things that happen in the song that haven't happened before. So, you know, it could be an intro that was very special. It could be a verse, a bridge, a middle 8, a chorus. Something at the end has got to happen. You can't start repeating it all again. And if you get that magic sort of number, then you're onto something that's going to really catch people's imagination all the way through. So I forgot where I was.
No, you were just talking about, you know, the process of writing. Yeah, of writing those.
And then we'd come together as a band, and we'd be able to play the song. And so we never go into a studio not knowing what we were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd then take, the 5 of us would then, with a producer, go in, that already heard the songs, go in and we'd start recording drums up. So we knew what the drummer knew what he was doing. He'd play to a click in his ear, and he would put down the drums. You'd edit the tape if there was a few stops and starts and you wanted to tighten things up. Mm. But the drummer had a feel, right? So it wasn't a click. It was to a click, but it's got to move a little bit. So then when my brother comes along with his bass guitar, he has to move in the same way. Mm. And then eventually everyone moves a little bit. And that's something that I find that I try and do in my work now when I'm working on computers, is try and put some slight movement in here and there. I don't mean musicians not playing it together. I just mean, it depends what kind of music you're doing. If you're doing really straight dance music, then...
Right, but no, you want that slight feel of organicness.
That's right, yeah. So, and then we just put down guitars and eventually vocals and backing vocals, and then it was the process of mixing. In those days, we were working on originally on analog,
So forget about all these DAWs that everyone works with when we talk about
We were
Logic,
24
Pro Tools, Ableton, boom, forget that.
Well, that didn't exist. So it was 24 tracks of tape. And you think that was actually a lot. When you think the Beatles were recording at the beginning on 4 tracks, you know, and, you know, they did Sgt. Pepper's on 8 track, you know, where they're just bouncing down all the time, you know. But we were on 24, and eventually later on in the 80s, we'd move onto 48 track, you know, and then eventually digital tape. I think one of the big things that happened in music in the 80s that made a certain sound in the 80s was digital reverb, when that came in with the lexicon. And so people didn't just use the plate reverb, which was a real just piece of metal plate you'd send the music down into, and then with a microphone in there, and it'd come back and you'd have a reverb or a spring. But we actually had digital, and the digital reverb was very, very musical. And so producer like Trevor Horn, who did ABC and he did us, and a lot of, and Frankie Goes to Hollywood, and amazing records. He created the sound of the 80s, really. He's like the Phil Spector of the 80s. You know, he would fill that space with beautifully thought out reverbs, you know, and suddenly, oh wow, that guitar I'm hearing is coming from over there, and that percussion's right up close, and you know, that sense of 3-dimension. And I think that's so important in music.
So was you sitting in on that process? Were you very hands-on, or was you from a distance and just throwing opinions? Like, what was it hearing your music being sort of EQ'd, mixed down?
I love the desk, you know, I love the big desk, and I like getting, you know, we were pretty opinionated, and you know, I bought a lot of soul records that had 12-inch mixes, and reggae records as well with dub mixes. And so when we did our first single, we just said, why don't we make a long dance version of this? We weren't the kind of music to make dance music, like you know, like disco 12 inches. But we made a long 12-inch of it because I just loved on the desk when you can mute sounds and other things would happen. And it'd be, wow, this is a different arrangement entirely. Let's try and make up a whole thing. So the desk became an instrument to work with, which I loved.
Can I sort of just take you to a moment like where you made a song, like, you know, okay, here's another thing that kind of kicks with me is like, I can always remember PM Dawn, Set Adrift.
Yeah.
And like, you know, that's a real cool song in the world of hip hop to me. I love that track. And probably that also, I wouldn't be surprised if that made it to #1 in the UK or very close to as well.
That was #1 in America, yeah.
And that was sampling True. Yeah, that was sampling True.
Yeah.
What's it like? And that was probably a good 10 years after True was a hit.
7 years.
7 years.
After
What's it like when someone comes back to you and goes, "We've used this sample, you know, did you listen to it first? Did you know what, go with it?"
That was like, there were only, I think at that point, there'd only been 2 or 3 or 4 samples ever. The African Bombassa had done Kraftwerk in one of his songs. Queen had been used in a Vanilla Ice song, and there was no precedent. No one knew how much it was worth, what to negotiate. But I was really thrilled because it goes back to what I said earlier about ownership. You know, when I wrote over that song, If I Had a Hammer, and I wrote my own words, you know, I was trying to, or when I did True, and I was trying to own a bit of an Al Green type song and make my own. And I think sampling is sometimes about trying to own, but make your own, a piece of the past culture that's influenced you. You know, something that is, you just think, well, you know, as musicians, we're all really eclectic. We love music. It all goes in here and filters through. We make our own thing. But that began a kind of era where people would openly admit to the influence, but say, I'm just going to send it that way, you know, but you're still going to be in there. And it's like a movie. It's like a collage. It's you know, it's like when Picasso and Braque made their collages, and they got bits of the newspaper of the time, and they got an old picture of a pipe, and they stuck it all together, and it was original. And that's sort of what sampling is. And I'm really proud because I've got these 2 amazing, cool black dudes singing my record, you know?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I can imagine some people, there could be such a different take on it. Some people could be offended and be like, look, I've worked really hard to craft this, leave it alone.
I listen to them all. I never sold my publishing. I kept my publishing. I still.
So you actually financially benefit from that as well, I take it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And you have to make sure you do.
But still, on the artistic side, I'm sure that there's still a pride. It sounds to me that there's a pride in hearing it.
Yeah. No, I get sent whatever gets sampled and the songs that people want to do, and I get sent them in advance, and I have a veto if I want. So if it's some really awful, people just, comedy almost, disrespectful, man, I won't do it.
It's so bad, it's disrespectful.
But usually, I think if someone is, trying to make music and that's their leverage, that's their lever, that's their thing that's going to push their song somewhere else, take them somewhere else, and they're still being influenced by something that was done 30 years ago, then I'm more than proud and honored to let them do it. And those kind of things, you normally fix your price depending on who they are. I mean, R. Kelly used True once,
Okay.
Lloyd used True,
Wow.
and they paid quite a high price. Black Eyed Peas did it.
Wow.
But when actually Black Eyed Peas just did a straight cover version. But if a band starting out comes along, you don't get them to spend money on it. You're more than willing just to cut a deal with them, and let them take it away. So I think there's you just you cut your cloth depending on what that is. But no, I just think it's an honor to have to sort of get out there and. Some people don't even know who made that record. They don't even know it was Spandau Ballet. They don't even know the story. They just know that it's been there in their life for so many years. It's like a piece of folk music.
And when you write stuff, Gary, and you say to your brother, sing that, are there ever times when you're like, you've written this, I've got this vision, and you guys are absolutely butchering it. It does not sound like what.
I mean, the only.
Or does it always translate well?
No, the only person ever, Tony Hadley was a singer of Spandau. So the only person I ever gave, I was constantly writing songs for Tony at that period, and maybe that was why I wanted to get away towards the end of it, because sometimes I wanted to make my own record and stuff like that. Write lyrics that I felt were more personal to me. So if you're writing for someone else, it's very hard to be really personal in your lyrics. And I remember writing a song called Through the Barricades and really struggled to give it to Tony to sing. Mm-hmm. I had ended up performing it first, funnily enough, at Trevor Huddleston, who had, this bishop who gave me the cassette. I never saw him from 1971 when he gave me that cassette player. I never saw him anymore until 1986 when he had organized this Artists Against Apartheid concert at Clapham Common with 100,000 people watching.
Wow.
And he got in touch with me and he said, would you come and sing a song for me? So I went and sang this new song. And he was an extraordinary man, because I remember when he first gave me his cassette recorder, he said he'd given a trumpet to a young trumpet player in Africa and he likes inspiring people. And when I went along to that Clapham Common gig, he said, I've got a trumpet player here that I gave a trumpet to all those years ago. And it was a guy called Hugh Masekela.
Oh, only Hugh Masekela then. Okay, well, there we go. He's got a good track record of had. Can you get that guy to give me an instrument, please?
He's dead now, I'm afraid.
Oh, damn. Damn. I would have done anything for an instrument from him.
But people so I ended up doing Through the Barricades at the concert and a couple of other times, and I couldn't give it away.
Yeah.
But I had to, because that's how we were, that's where we were, the band, And
did you have to let go of your connection? Did you let go of your connection to the song at that point and just sort of just go, you take it however you want to take it?
I couldn't be in the room when he was singing it. So
wow.
I think there was, not in an angry way,
mm-hmm.
I just thought, I'm never going to produce this fairly. I'm going to be like trying to get him to sing it this way, trying to get him to sing that way. I think that was, so I think there is an element of that, and I know that Pete and Roger from The Who now, Pete does all the demos himself, sings all the songs himself, and then Roger sings separately in another studio and another day, because I think sometimes, the singer needs to have his input. You need to be able to take that song and, interpret it in his way or her way.
So when you say you made a move on from Spandau Ballet,
yeah,
was that a lot, was the motivation for that, was that sort of you wanting to do your own thing, you not wanting to pass on everything all the time, and you to want to be a bit more introspective and more personal with your stuff?
It was, yeah, it was. And but I got tripped up musically, really, because I ended up going back into acting, and I did the Craze film, and then I went to America and I did The Bodyguard with Whitney Houston.
Yeah, I noticed that. And you did another film that was produced by Tarantino as well, which must have been early in his career.
Killing Zoe, yeah. So I ended up getting sort of waylaid, really, and I fell out of love with, I don't know, I didn't fall out of love with music. I just found in retrospect, I regret it. I'd sort of put my guitar in a box for about 4 years, and I just thought I wanted to pursue a different thing. But personally, I don't think you can substitute music with acting. As much as I like acting, it's always going to be other people's words, and I'm always going to be directed by a director. And you're like an instrument. You're a violin. You're a guitar, But with music, that's something that, you can create from a blank page, from a screen, from scratch, and it's yours, it's your voice. And if you mess it up, you mess it up. It's something much more personal to you. So anyway, I ended up, my marriage fell apart, and when I was in LA, and I ended up writing what became my first solo album and getting back into music. But I've always, then I started with a family. So I always, my life then gets split between doing some acting, doing some music, looking after my family. But then Spandau get back together every now and again, and we do a big world tour, and we will have a big fight, and then we all get, that's things. But in the meantime, I kept, as I said, I kept my publishing, and the guy who was that kid who was 2 or 3 years older than us back at school, who said, I can manage your band, he still looks after my publishing today.
I love it. I love the fact that actually you guys are a bunch of schoolmates, and I think no matter what kind of arguments you have between you, you'll probably always check in on each other. Yeah.
So, but I was lucky enough about 2 years ago to end up being asked to play with Nick Mason, who is, for anyone who doesn't know, he was the drummer with Pink Floyd. He's a massive star with Pink Floyd, and co-wrote quite a lot of the material. So there's David Gilmour on one side, there's Roger Waters on the other side. They all go out and do their big Pink Floyd shows with 10 people. Nick does all the stuff before Dark Side of the Moon, all the psychedelic stuff that a man called Syd Barrett wrote and sang, and I play with a great bass player called Guy Pratt, who's played on Madonna records and Michael Jackson records, and he's in the band too. And so there's Nick Mason on drums, Guy on bass. The rhythm section is extraordinary. And
your guitar and vocals, right?
My guitar and vocals, and there's another guitarist and a keyboard player. And so we've been together about 2 years touring around America and Europe. And then this year we were meant to be touring the whole of the year. And of course this has happened, and everyone's locked down.
But this is what I mean. No one's too big or too small to be affected by this sort of pandemic that we've gone and faced. So it's had an impact on your touring schedule. Yeah,
so and we actually do have a live album and live film coming out in September on Sony. But so I spent the time writing and recording my own solo record, which I don't know when that's going to come out, but I'm financing it myself, actually, just making this record, and hopefully year after next, if Nick and I go back on the road next year, then it'll be the year after that it can come out. But it kept me sane.
So let me just, because we'll hone in on that as well, and what it's like creating in a pandemic, which I'm sure resonates with a lot of the people at Point Blank right now who are like, stuck here, what do I do? But I'm just sort of thinking about you having taken a hiatus away from music. You get involved with some amazing films, which you flippantly say, The Bodyguard with Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston, The Craze, epic film, and involved with Tarantino's production, and absolutely crazy. But then what did it feel like to get Nick Mason contacts you, the drummer from Pink Floyd, and he said, come on, get involved with this, Saucer Full of Secrets, come on.
What I love most of all, I realized, even in acting, I like theatre the most. So, and in music, I really love being on the stage. I love making music as well, and I'm in the studio right now, and I love that. That's a beautiful thing. But nothing can really beat the thrill of being on stage for me, because I just love that, you know, the sense of anticipation, the terrifying feeling you get going on stage.
Never changes, I take it.
What I worry about most of all is the technical stuff, and I involve myself and I worry about all the technical stuff, the lights, the sound, everything, you know. But that feeling, you know, of interaction with other humans, which was what we miss so much, all of us at the moment, is really beautiful. And it's funny because I've tried to have to substitute that. I have to say, Nick gave me confidence to do my own record again now, because it showed me I could sing, I can play guitar, you know, all those things I need to be reminded of and have faith in myself of, because we're all so critical of ourselves all the time. And he gave me more confidence to go and write another record. But I suppose in lockdown, you know, for a start, the band, Source Full of Secrets, and Nick, we Zoom every single week, all 5 of us up on the screen, keeping in touch, keeping it going. I've built relationships in the last few months with people that I never met, you know, other musicians that I've never met.
Yeah.
You know, I've been doing this record remotely to a large extent. So I use Logic. I start a lot of I write my ideas on a piano or guitar, mostly piano at the moment, then take them up and I try and put that song into Logic. What I don't do, and I've never been good at doing, is going and starting a song in Logic, not knowing where I'm going. So getting a groove going, and then going to the keyboard, and then try and find what the song is. I'm really old school, and I've really worked out what the song is on the piano first. All of it, verse, bridge, middle eight, chorus, outro. Then I can take it upstairs. And sometimes it dies when I get onto Logic, because it's got all the fluidity when I'm on the piano. And then when I try and get it up and put beats on it and put some drums on it, and
it suddenly
starts to grid.
Yeah, the grid.
You know? So I work with a really great programmer as well, and I've been working with him remotely, and we've been sending things backwards and forwards to each other. And now I'm in the same room as him, and he's very, very good at the tweaking of getting, you know, retardando as it slows down here. Not all the songs are like that, but as I say, you know, the danger of where we are with Logic now is, in the old days, you know, I would just have this song and there'll be a bass player, a drummer, a singer, and a percussionist, sax player, and a guitarist. That was all the instrumentation, and then a keyboard. That's all the instrumentation there was. Now there's so many choices.
You can spend 2 hours just deliberating over whether to use one sound over the next.
So what I think you have to do is get it down quickly, get the structure down quickly, get up on my top of my Logic. I have, you know, I put intro, verse 2, bridge, chorus, get it all down, know where it all is, and then just try and get one version of it down, because you can always strip that away. And then you know, I like to use different things. So sometimes I'll be using, you know, program fake drums. Other times I'll do my program drums exactly like real drums. But then I've found some great drummers. I've been working with Jed Lynch, who works with Peter Gabriel, and a guy called Ash Sohn, who works with Trevor Horn. And I've been getting my stuff over to them. Then I look at them. We look at each other on FaceTime, on Zoom. We have a chat. Then they know roughly what I want, because that's all programmed in. And I say, look, follow some of those licks, but give me your own stuff as well, you know. And then it all comes back, and then we mix it down. And I've done the same. Today I had this great girl called Lily Karasik, who's done some trumpet for me. She plays with George Ezra, and she's just done a beautiful trumpet for me. And I just found by Googling around on Instagram, actually, via Jacob Collier, who's an amazing young artist, and he's a jazz, he's part of that whole jazz scene, and he had a trumpet player that he was using, and there she was, and so got in touch.
You're using the social media, you're just through internet, so rather than sort of being stuck entirely in your own world, you're using all these mediums, the conferencing tools like Zoom, Facebook, to collaborate. You're out on Instagram asking people, wow,
there's so many great young people. So she's only like in her early 20s and just come out of jazz school, and you know, I'd rather try someone like that than go to one of the old guys that have been doing it for years and years, because I just think, you know, it's a great opportunity, and they've got to have other ideas.
And are you enjoying this process, Gary, of like
love it? I love it. I want to get
doing something independently, just putting out music, not thinking about. I take it you're not thinking about the massive grand scheme of the big release at the moment, but you're just thinking, let me just create.
I'm only in the creative bit. But now I'm gonna, because I finance this myself so far. Don't have a record label, but I do. I'm kind of with Sony, but I can move around. And then I'm putting 10 tracks in order, and then I'm going to start to just approach some labels and talk to people, because eventually I want to boost them up, put some strings on and stuff like that. And it'll be really nice to have a label and a vision of where it's going. But what I'm doing right now, which I'm really enjoying, is putting those 10 tracks in the best order I can. You know, that's an art form in itself. You know, ordering up
the playlist, the order of which it goes.
So I keep putting it into iTunes, and I just keep jumbling it around and playing it in my car. And no, this one goes better first, or you know.
It's like writing the movie, I guess. It's creating that soundscape.
Yeah, you know, a movie has 3 acts. A song, you know, has got a story. You know, a song is more like a snapshot than often a story. It's very hard to have us call a song, to write a song that is a proper beginning, middle, and end story. It's a snapshot of an emotion. But it really, for me, you know, the real key things in a song is a great title and you know an angle where the lyrics are, you know, it's not like anything else.
I got a question from one of our people that are in the little gallery with us now. Travis, I can ask the question for you, but I just love the humanity of actually hearing someone's voice. Travis, are you with us? Can you unmute your mic for a minute, Travis? Or are we too nervous? All right, he's not going to unmute. Okay, I'll ask it for him then. Travis said, can you give us any tips or hacks for good songwriting? And there was some amongst what you were saying already, to be honest, Gary, but if you had to pass on one sort of hint.
Yeah, I think listen to great songs, listen to classics, go and analyze some great old classics of, you know, whatever era it might be, because there's a reason that they are classics and they've become hits. And they've got all the tricks inside there. They've got the map, you know, that's there's bound to be a really interesting introduction. There's bound to be something where the song just opens up and goes in to itself. So dynamics is really important in a song. You know, I think in any piece of music, whether it's instrumental or anything, it's the dynamic change in a song, the gear changes, and where you're going to end up, and have a vision about where you're going to end up, and take as much time thinking about the ending of the song as you do about the chorus of the song.
I've got another comment here from someone who says this was one of the YouTube viewers who said they loved the new BBC mockumentary. What was it like, you know, having something like that done?
Oh, we loved it. I thought it was really funny to do. We absolutely loved it. We've been working on it for about a year and a half, and with this guy called Rhys Thomas, who was in the Fast Show, and he's a brilliant comic. And the spoof is he's making a documentary about me and my brother, but of course it's completely insane, you know. And it's a bit like us, but it's more extreme and more pumped up, and weird things happen to us. You know, I've got my vegetarian meat company called Wange, and it's getting busted. But it's a really funny show, and I think hopefully we'll do some more.
I was gonna. Okay, so I was gonna.
I've spent all my life trying to get people to take me seriously, and just if they do, I take the piss out of it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, typical. So I was just going to ask if anyone else within the panel has any other questions that they'd like to ask. Please feel free to ask. If not, I will take. Yeah, Joe, go with it, mate.
Yeah, hi, Gary. You talked about producers, and obviously when you're a band and you go into a studio for the first time, there's a producer there. Have you ever kind of had a kind of friction with a particular producer, maybe because they want to move you in a direction as a band you don't want to go, or anything like that? Or...
Yeah, we have. Yeah. I mean, I can remember a key one in the old days was when we very first worked with Trevor Horn. He was going to produce the True album, And we, at that time, it was called the Pleasure Project, because I had a song called Pleasure, and he was working on that, and that was going to be the first single. And we were in Air Studios, and he spent a long time getting the drum sound, and then we were doing the drums all day that day. And he called our manager that night and said, "I'll only carry on with this if we get rid of our drummer, and he'll bring a session player in." Yeah. And we said, you know what, our drummer's such an important part of our band, and there's nothing wrong with him for a start. And we moved on. So we actually left Trevor at that point and ended up being produced by Swain and Jolly on that album. Yeah, I'm quite opinionated about it, but I think you make your biggest choice when you choose the producer. So it's a bit like if you're directing a film and you choose an actor, that's the most a director can ever do. And then he can't complain after that the actor's not doing it the way he wanted them to do it. So I think you've got to be very clear about who you're producing.
Yeah, because I mean, Trevor Horn, he's one of those guys that had this huge studio full of fair lights and all types of things. So I imagine he already kind of had an idea where he wanted to take you, and maybe it wasn't your.
Yeah, and we came back and we worked with him again, actually, years and years later. So and I had a great experience working with him. But I think by then we were a mature band,
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Are you a producer as well?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I mean, I make electronic music, but so I know all the major producers of the past and what they did, and I work with samples a lot. But also I've worked with live musicians in the past, and sometimes your approach to making music as an electronic musician is very different to the way they play live. So it sometimes creates a tension.
Yeah. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Great question, by the way, Joe. Thanks very much for that.
That's all right.
If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to ask. I'm always hesitant to wrap up before I've given everyone the chance to speak. Fantastic question there from Joe. Really appreciate it. If we've managed to cover all our bases in that case, I guess all that remains to be said is just how much gratitude I have for your time, Gary. It was such a pleasure speaking to you.
No, all you guys. Thank you for having me on. Thanks, TJ.
It's been great, man. And this is just golden footage and great opportunity to hear, from someone that's had massive success, achieved great things, #1 songwriter. It's a pleasure. And it really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much for your time, Gary.
Pleasure to do it.
I hope when the dust settles and when this whole pandemic ends, you can actually meet some of our students in person and come down and talk about the songwriting process as well.
100%. 100%.
I'd love that. It will happen.
All right, man. All the best.
Well, thanks, Gary. I'll speak to you on the other side with the email and stuff like that. But thank you so much for your time. That was amazing.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone, for attending. Cheers.